Welcome, Todd Vincent, the Fermented Farmer, here at our homestead farm in Middle Tennessee again to talk to you about another regenerative agriculture and sustainable opportunity that we're doing on this farm. These bins right here are going to be the start of our vermiculture or worm farming. So worm farming is something that all of us can do. There are several ways to do this. This is what we're starting with, and this will just continue to grow into a larger and larger production because we're going to use what the worms produce to, one, feed our plants from making compost tea with it, and to just directly put it right onto the ground as a root fertilizer as well. So we're gonna fill these bins, but before I do, I wanna talk to you about them. We chose these as a starting point because this plastic is not brittle. It's more rubbery because you're gonna be drilling some holes in the side of these for vents. So the worms have to have some air. And the very bottom of this are little bitty holes. So small enough that the worms can't go through them, but large enough that excess water will drain out. So that's what we're going to do with those. The lid is essential, so you definitely want a lid because sunlight, they don't like light. And so when we get the worms and put them in here, we're going to use light to drive them down into the soil so that they'll start doing their thing. So what we're going to do now is start setting up all the components that we're going to need to get an environment in here that's going to be inviting for the worms. So we're going to start with our own compost that any of our plant scraps or soil mix that we've put together and mixed, which has peat moss and perlite, which is kind of an expanded sand, we're going to be putting in here. We're also going to use our cardboard, so any cardboard that we get that we can recycle and use, we're going to use that in here, so that's part of this program. And then we're also going to have some food scraps from things that we harvest that are going to be in a fresher form. And you need all of those things. You need wet stuff, dry stuff, a lot of paper products. They really like that tree or wood products. So in here you'll see, I'm going to bring this over. In here we've actually got plant with root matter on it, a lot of soil still on there and material. There's dry plant matter in here as well. We're going to put that down first as the base. And some of these stems, I know they won't break down right away, but when we go to harvest what they have broken down, these stems will be sifted out and maybe go back in the next batch. So those don't really bother me too much. So we're going to get all those in there. We're also going to, this is some of the greens that there's lavender in here that we've harvested, chickweed, some plantain. And so we're gonna mix these down into there as well, because worms really like to come up and get the freshness of that and turn that into compost as well. It's food for them. Also, when you have things that are fermenting or composting down, it creates warmth. Worms really want to be between 55 and 90, so you got to be careful that these aren't in the sun because they can get too high and kill your worms, and it can get too cold and kill your worms. So you always want to keep your worm farming somewhere where you can keep it in that range, which is a pretty broad range, so it's not that hard to do. Things like organic apples has been eaten. Those things will also go in here. They love those. They're not big fans of citrus, so we're not going to use any citrus things that we are growing or eating. But banana peels, apples, coffee grinds, they do like that. We'll just keep filling some of these and just kind of layering it in. And I want to show you what our paper and cardboard look like. So we've just shredded it up in a normal paper shredder in the office. And we're just going to sprinkle some of this in each one. Now, we've got perlite, like I mentioned in here. A worm is a lot like a chicken because it has a gizzard in the way it digests. So that gizzard has grit in it. So those of you that have chickens, you know, you put oyster shells or sand or gritty soil, and that gets in their gizzard, and that helps break down their food. Same thing with worms, they have a gizzard. And so the perlite is little pieces of sand, expanded sand. Also, what you can use at home, those of you at home, is eggshells. So if you take your eggshells and just crush them up, you know, you can just use your hands and really kind of get them crushed small like that. That will really help with, those are fresh eggshells, getting the yolk off of me. But that will actually really help with the ability of these worms to digest, because our goal is to every 21 days change these out. So each box will contain 5,000 red wigglers, and we're going to do a couple boxes with African night crawlers. They're both great worms to use. We're going to try them both, and as we expand this, we'll decide on probably what one is best, or do we want a combination, or have both kinds. So as we get that in there, now, you know I was going to have to do this, but I'm totally bringing fermentation into my worm bins. And there's actually a reason, not just because I'm a fermented farmer, it's because fermentation is going to help get these bins ready for the worms. Because we're going to let these sit for several weeks before we put the worms inside of these. And so this happens to be my Italian carrot slaw. You can see it's definitely under pressure. I'm not sure how this is going to be opening this. Okay, not too bad. As you can see, it's bubbling. Woo! Smells amazing. So and it doesn't take a lot. There is a lot of bacteria, live good bugs in a little bit of this. So we're just going to sprinkle some of this in each one of these. And then we'll mix that around so that all gets mixed in really well. Want to get some paper in this one. So what we'll do is we're going to let these sit for probably 3 weeks, and they're really going to settle, and the microbe activity is really going to get going. The process of breaking down will start, which is going to be a great environment for these worms to come into and just get started. If you can do it without that, you can start them immediately. It just will take them a lot longer to get that process going. We want them to get started because we're excited about making worm casting compost tea and using them on the plants. It's spring, it's still cool, but it is spring, and we are out planting and getting things ready. We believe that this is partnering with nature. And we're going to try to partner with nature on everything we do here at the farm. And the more that we can use these components to reduce our waste into something that becomes very beneficial, that is a part of healing this planet. So each and every video that we do, we're really going to try to highlight all of these things, because all of you, no matter whether you have a farm, big or small, or you're at home in a neighborhood, a subdivision, or even in the city, you can do worm farming at as small or as large of a capacity as you want. And so don't let it intimidate you. It doesn't stink. Once these worms get going, there's not going to be a bad odor. It's a great way to produce even small amounts of very nutritious soil mix that you can add to your potted plants in your home, that you can add to your backyard garden.